We're going to turn now to Senegal, though, where opposition leader Bassirou Diomaye Faye has been named Senegal's next president after the country's ruling coalition conceded defeat in a nationwide election. The 44-year-old is set to become Senegal's youngest ever president. And he'd been in prison less than 2 weeks before the vote, which followed months of political turmoil in one of Africa's most stable democracies. In his victory speech, Faye promised to deliver a fresh chapter for Senegal.
The people of Senegal have chosen to break with the past, to make real the immense hopes raised by our vision of society. I hope that this vision of society will bring about their aspirations. I pledge to govern with humility and transparency, and to fight corruption at all levels. I pledge to devote myself fully to rebuilding our institutions and strengthening the foundations of our way of life together.
And I'm very pleased to welcome Oluwole Ojewale, a Dakar-based regional coordinator for Central Africa at the Institute for Security Studies. Now, we've just heard President-elect Bassirou Diomaye Faye there, and he's not a particularly well-known figure. Can you tell us just how well prepared you think he is to take on leadership of this country?
Thank you so much for having me. I think he has substantial experience in public service, and then also have a lot of allies to rely upon, particularly in Sonko, that prop him up for this position. So I think he's sufficiently prepared to enter the first office in the land and discharge his responsibilities that will be attached to that office. There are a lot of questions about not having political experiences in the corridor of power. But I believe he's going to take charge of that and then deliver to the best of his capability. We can't downplay on other things that people are really mentioning in terms of age and those experiences.
So let's look at the challenges that lay ahead for him. What do you think will be the most crucial issues that Faye is facing when he takes up the role of president?
The first is the economic realities that is really biting in terms of youth employment. That is ripe in Senegal. There is also the need for development across sector in education, in health, security, and otherwise. But much more important are the issues of the last 3 years, which really characterize political development here. So there is a need for grand legislative reform that is going to probably devolve the presidential power in the country. And then to also fight corruption, which I think has been the bane of development in this country.
Now, you mentioned that he does have allies. How helpful do you think they will be in his efforts to take on corruption and to bolster the economy in Senegal?
Yes, they want to break away from the old order. And, this party is actually largely a youth-driven party. And I think they know the responsibility that is resting upon their shoulder now to really propel Senegal to where it ought to be economically, to really propel Senegal to where it ought to be within the region, and sustain that democratic solidarity, and ensure in particular that event of political uprising that have characterized this country in the last 3 years don't become the new norm going forward. That is the reason for that constitutional and legislative reform that they need to carry out in the country. And that must deliver dividends of democracy to the people.
Now, he himself is also quite young at just 44 years old. And you mentioned he has a lot of support from the youth. Can you tell us a little bit more about who exactly was behind his campaign and who will be most happy to see him taking office?
Well, I think it is just like a case of an accidental precedent. I think barely a year ago, Diomaye Faye didn't think he was even going to become maybe prime minister or talk less of president. And the turn of events as a result of the incarceration of Sonko propelled him forward. And he should know the responsibility that is really lying on his, that is lying on his shoulder now, because he was largely propelled into this office through the vote of the people, the youth in particular. And it's also a protest vote, really, because of the recent event and the fact that people want to break away from the past. So he has secured overwhelming majority of the support of the youth, the subalterns, the workers' party, the workers' union, laborers, and every nooks and cranny of the country where people have really galvanized this political support, democratic support, and it must not fail them. So it is a broad-based coalition, consensus, that actually brought him into power. And you can see heavyweight political giants like Abdelwad, also 2 days to the election, pledges support and solidarity for him. I think this is what he was able to galvanize to win this election.
So a vote for change in Senegal. Thank you so much for joining us with that analysis. That is Oluwole Ojewale, Dakar-based regional coordinator for Central Africa at the Institute for Security Studies. Many thanks.
Thank you for having me.